All right, we're doing our focus lesson number 2, state government. We just discussed what the three branches were at the federal level, and the kids said that they are the legislative, judicial, and executive branches, right? Government, state government in particular. In 1992, fourth graders in Fairborn, Ohio, noticed that Ohio had no state reptile. The students decided to find one. After a lot of research and discussion, they chose the black racer snake, known as the farmer's friend because it eats disease carrying mice. The black racer lives in all 88 counties. One of the students, Jacob Mercer, sent a letter to state representatives and senators asking if the black racer could be the state reptile. In this lesson, you will find out how Jacob's letter led to the creation of a new law. So we're going to find out how the introduction of a bill becomes a law. All right. So our Ohio Constitution, each state in the United States has its own constitution. And Ohio has its own, just like our federal government, we have the Constitution, right? That's what all of our laws are based on. Well, Ohio has its own as well. The Ohio Constitution, as you learned in Chapter 5, the Ohio Constitution was written in 1802. You can read a section of the Ohio Constitution on page 307. Okay? Okay. Like the United States Constitution, it calls for three branches of government. So our state government has three branches as well. The Ohio Constitution was changed twice over its 200-year history. Once in 1851 and again in 1967. Both changes gave more power to the people of Ohio. And that's a good thing, right? Ohio's government at work. The Ohio State House in Columbus is the heart of the Ohio state government. Most of the state's services are planned and put into action in this building. United States citizens pay taxes to their state governments. State taxes are used to pay for items and services for the people of each state. State taxes also help you pay for thousands of people who work for the state, right? That's for your government. So that's where our state tax is going. I'm a public employee. They go to teachers as well, right? Thousands of people who work for the state. Every year, the Ohio government makes a budget or a plan for using an amount of money for a specific purpose. Okay? How are federal taxes and state taxes used in similar ways, right? So you could probably figure that out, how the federal government and the state governments use tax money in the same ways, right? Doesn't the federal government fund some of our schools in Ohio? They do. And don't our state taxes also fund schools in Ohio? So that's one way that they're similar. All right, let's take a look at this. Article 1, Bill of Rights, Section 1. All men are, by nature, free and independent and have certain inalienable rights, among which are enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and seeking and obtaining happiness and safety. That's part of our Ohio Charter. It sounds a lot like the federal Constitution, right? All men are created equal and have the right to pursue and enjoy happiness, right? Inalienable, cannot be changed or taken away. They can't alienate those rights, right? Dante, that's what that means. Liberty means freedom, acquiring, gaining, or possessing something, and obtaining means getting. It says, what kind of life did the writers of the Ohio Constitution want for Ohio citizens? You could probably get a lot from just that little section, right? Well, let's keep going. Hold on. Let's keep reading. Data graphic, state tax and spending. Oh, this is interesting. Let's look at this. Ready? You guys ready? It says, the state of Ohio gets money to pay for all the services it provides its citizens through taxes. The circle graph shows how state tax money was spent in 2012. The table shows changes in spending over 4 years in certain areas of the state government. Look at the graph and the table to answer questions. All right, look. So how do we spend tax money? Let's look at the circle graph. What do we spend the most tax money on? Who can tell me? Health and human services, 52%. How about primary and secondary education? Right? Primary and secondary education. What percentage do we spend on that? Do we know? How much? Yeah, 24%. That's quite a bit, right? How about higher education? Higher education. Justice and public protection. And then 10% goes to other. All right. Do you look at that graph and think to yourself, I think they should spend a higher percentage on a certain area than they do? Does anybody have that opinion right now? Do you? Kinsley, what do you think they should spend more money on? Really? I disagree. Yeah. I was thinking 6%. I would rather see chip away at health and human services a little, maybe 10%, go to 42%, and throw that 10% towards the justice system and the police departments, fire departments, ambulances, right? All right. Well, let's keep reading. All right. So think about state tax and spending. Number one, Brody, ready for this? What total percentage of state tax money was used for education in Ohio? 2012. You should be able to look at these and determine that. All right. You're going to answer those three questions about the graph. All right. Here we go. Now we're going to talk about how a bill becomes a law. Ready? State government in Ohio uses the same system of checks and balances as the federal government, right? We talked about that. If the state or the federal legislative branch, the federal, comes up with a law that is crazy, it doesn't match our Constitution, can they still impose that on the people? Kinsley says no. What two checks would come into play? How many branches of government are there? What are they again? Give it to me nice and loud. Executive, judicial, and legislative. So if the legislative branch, Michael, comes up with something crazy, what two checks do we have in place to stop that craziness?
The executive branch and the judicial.
The judicial could come in and say that's doesn't match our Constitution, and the executive branch could say we're not gonna execute this. They veto the law. Okay? All three branches have to be in agreement, or at least two of the three. Legislative branch. Ohio's legislative branch makes laws, right? There are 33 state senators and 99 state representatives. Senators are elected every 4 years, while representatives are elected every 2 years. These groups make up the General Assembly. The General Assembly would be the same as the Congress, right? How are laws made? It all begins with a bill. That's the idea. A bill's like the idea, or a written idea for a new law. A bill can be written by either a group of the General Assembly, right? Either group of the General Assembly. Jacob Mercer's letter to the General Assembly was made into a bill. It asked state lawmakers in Ohio to name the black racer the official state reptile. At the time, Ohio had a state flower, a state animal, and a state song, which you can read on page 310. The bill became an Ohio law in 1995. Study the chart on this page to see the steps involved in a bill becoming a law. And I have a really great BrainPop video, too, that I'll post up on here for you. The executive branch, who is the leader of the executive branch? Who is it? No, that's the executive branch at the federal level. Who's the leader of so you're right. Mike DeWine. What is his role? Governor. The executive branch, headed by the governor, approves new laws and puts them into action. Every 4 years, people vote for a governor and lieutenant governor as a team. If anything happens to the governor, the lieutenant governor takes over. The governor chooses leaders for more than 30 state departments, councils, and committees. Right? All right, so the question is, how is Ohio state government similar to the federal government? What's one way you could easily say this? What's one way that they're both similar? Come on. Federal government and state government. How are they both similar? Come on. What is it? They what? Well, they're both governments, but what are similar about those governments? What's exactly the same? Jack.
They give taxes.
They both impose taxes, but how is the government built? There's three. What do you call? There's three. What do we call those?
Legislative, judicial, and
It-
executive.
Yeah, so each of them have the legislative, judicial, and executive branches. Branches. They're bicameral. All right, how a bill becomes a law. First, a citizen comes up with an idea. That's the first step. You write one of your representatives. Then the representative gets this idea, and members of the House of Representatives or the state propose the bill. So they say, hey, this is a great idea. So those representatives turn it into a bill. It's an official, right? Then the General Assembly votes to approve the bill. Then the bill goes on over to the governor, and the governor either signs it into law or vetoes it. Veto doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I guess we can't do it. Governor said we can't. If the governor vetoes a bill, it goes back to the General Assembly for rework. Okay? All right. If he approves it, if it's vetoed, another vote can be taken. If 3/5 of the General Assembly vote to approve it, the bill becomes a law. So the governor can say, I don't like it, but then the General Assembly can vote. If 3/5 or more say it's okay, then it's okay. See how that's nice and balanced, the power there, right? So there you have it. What happens if the governor does not like a bill that passes the General Assembly? You're going to have to read about it. Okay? Here's our Ohio State song right there. The Ohio State song, Beautiful Ohio. All right. Judicial branch. What do you suppose the judicial branch or the judges, what do they do at the state level and federal? What? They don't make decisions. They do decide. They decide on something very specific. Yes, Jack.
They judge if someone should go to jail or not.
No, not at that level. Local judges do. The judicial branch of government looks at the laws that the legislative branch comes up with, and they judge or decide whether or not those laws follow Ohio's Constitution or, at the federal level, our Constitution, the United States Constitution. Laws have to abide by the Constitution. That's why they say that's unconstitutional, right? It means it doesn't follow the law of the land in this country is our Constitution. And the law of the land in Ohio is our state constitution. So the judicial branch makes sure that those laws that are created follow the law of the land. That's their job. Ohio's judicial branch interprets laws. As in our federal government, Ohio's judicial branch is housed in a Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, though. There are 7 Supreme Court justices, a Chief Justice, and 6 other justices. Ohio Supreme Court justices are elected by residents of Ohio and serve 6-year terms. In 2003, Maureen O'Connor was elected to the Ohio Supreme Court. Her election gave the state court its first female majority. The Ohio Supreme Court usually hears cases when 2 or more lower courts have disagreed. Its decision is usually final in all the cases it hears. However, sometimes a case can move on to the United States Supreme Court. So you have the United States Supreme Court is the highest court. And then all the state Supreme Courts fall under the federal Supreme Court. See how that works? And then under the state courts, you have the local courts and so on and so forth. The Ohio Supreme Court also answers questions and makes decisions about whether laws follow the U.S. Constitution and the Ohio Constitution. Ohio Supreme Court justices make sure that lawyers and courts follow the rules of law, right, Jack? What does the Ohio Supreme Court usually hear cases? When do they usually hear cases? All right. So here is your focus questions down here. You'll answer those. Stop this. Good luck to you all.